Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Yanaya Agenda Forum and Dialogue Festival. We are on day 2 today, and the program is officially starting at 12:15. Shush. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining day 2 of Yanaya Agenda Forum and Dialogue Festival. It's day 2 today, and yesterday we had a very productive conversation where we were discussing very important issues. We also came to learn about some of the rules that we live with, but we are not aware of. And today we are moving on with the conversation. And colleagues, please feel free to populate the chat session with questions. My name is Hlengiwe Ndlovu, and I will be facilitating today's session for the whole day. On the panel today for the program, we are discussing the movie Standing on Their Shoulders, directed by Uxoliswa Sithole. And on the panel to discuss that movie, I have Ncebakazi Manzi, Dr. Danai Mbodza, and Uxoliswa Sithole. So before we start, you will see that our program starts from 12:15 to 1:15. We have a panel discussion on standing on their shoulders. So the discussion will run for an hour with each speaker speaking for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session and discussions and comments. So feel free to ask questions, feel free to comment, yes, and to engage. And then from 12:20 to 2:10, from 1 to 2:10, we're having a masterclass with Ubongi Weselani. So I'm hoping that everyone is staying with us for the next few hours as we go through the program. So I would like to introduce our panels for the first session. Ncebakazi Manzi is a broadcast media content creator, a writer, a podcast host, a singer, and a songwriter. In 2008, she co-founded Blackwash and later the September National Imbizo, both Black consciousness movements and critique post-1994 South Africa. Her MA thesis, completed in 2019, focuses on Black women's experiences within these movements. She currently serves as the acting program manager at Kaya FM, recently launched recently logged a quarterly blog called Usiba Luyadala. And Dr. Danai Mbodza will be our second speaker on the panel. She's a senior lecturer in African literature at the University of Witwatersrand. She holds a BA in African Studies and in African Studies and Women's Studies, and a BSOC in Gender and Transformation, and a PhD in African Literature and Cultural Studies. She specializes in gender and sexualities. And our third speaker on the panel is Uxoliswa Sithole, who is also the director of the movie Standing on Their Shoulders. So we are privileged to have Uxoliswa today with us as we engage on the movie. So Uxoliswa Sithole is a producer and a director who makes films mainly about women and children, focusing on justice, human rights, poverty. She started out her film career as an actress in anti-apartheid films like Cry, Freedom, and Mandela, and then moved into production as a receptionist for the BBC, Cecil John Rhodes, and as a PA to Val Kilmer on Ghost in the Darkness. So these are our three panelists today. And over to you, Ncebakazi.
Thank you so much, Hlengiwe. I hope everybody can hear me. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hlengiwe, and thank you to the Center for this opportunity. Throughout the lockdown period, the webinars that were hosted in this space were a very important source for me, just finding ways of carrying on and all the ideas that were shared here. So it's really a privilege to be a part of today's panel. And also thank you to Zistoli for creating a really beautiful and incredibly important film. Yeah, so I'm just going to share some of the things that moved me the most, questions that I had when I was watching the film. The first being how the film starts. I think it's within the first 2 minutes where, after a montage of some images that we see, there is a press conference that I think Mam Winnie is at, and she's with Unompendulo Mkhatshwa, and she's talking there about how inspired she is by the younger generation, referring to Fees Must Fall, of course. And there was something about that really moved me and made me think about this idea of Inyati Ibuzo Pambili, but at the same time thinking about the ways in which the older generation finds inspiration and some sort of revival. Because I think there she even says that she knows now that she will rest easy, in the afterlife. And I was thinking about almost a circular motion rather than a unidirectional situation where it's just about Inyati Ebuza Kwaba Pambili, but there's also this conversation, which I thought was a really beautiful way of opening up. And in fact, Usis Koli then uses Mamwini in that moment to lead her into a conversation about 1956, and that's when we enter into the archives. So I really thought it was a really beautiful thing, emphasizing that yes, there is the idea of standing on their shoulders, but there's also something that a younger generation is able to give back, almost unintending, not intending to do so. Later on, I think Ahmed Katrada also says the same thing about that moment at the elections conference, and he said he was inspired, which yeah, for me, just something about that moment, just imagining a person who has lived their life and seeing something like that, which I thought was really, really beautiful. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the use of Umkhonto Wesizwe, the song Hamba Kahle Umkhonto Wesizwe, somewhere in the middle of the film, which I also thought was a really beautiful way of using the music to do the work of resisting erasure, in the sense that I have personally, because of the way in which women are remembered or not, I haven't seen very many funeral scenes of women. And I don't know whether Sistoli took the song from the actual events of Mam Lilian Ngoyi's funeral, or if this was added in later. But whatever the case is, she then layers this over Mam Lilian Ngoyi's funeral and also Helen Joseph's funeral. And I found it very powerful because it felt like an insistence of imikhonto yesizwe lena ileli apha, as opposed to, because obviously the idea of the spear of the nation is in the public a very masculinized thing. And I think I remember in one of these webinars, Dr. Siphokazi Magadla challenging into yomkhonto, and she was talking about how umakoti goes and ayohlaba umkhonto enkundleni, in a way that kind of stakes a claim in the new home that she's going to be in. So on the one hand, there's in the public imagination, the spear is a very masculinized thing, but on the other hand, there are these spaces in which umkhonto does not necessarily represent that. And I found the use of Hamba Kahle Umkhonto absolutely brilliant, because there is the option. There's the other song that is often used when it's women, which is Igama Lamakhosikazi Malibongo, and it's also equally a beautiful song. But in that moment, I was like, oh wow, that's really powerful. And then not only that, 5 minutes later, Umam Tembi was talking about the idea of Umkhonto Wesizwe versus Umzana, which is this diminutive idea of the woman's wing of Umkhonto Wesizwe, and yet you have these women who are playing central roles within Umkhonto weSizwe, but they referred to as something else. You know, these are military strategists. They're important people for the success of this thing. And so I really appreciated the use of the music there. And then the other thing that I was interested in, obviously the manner in which Siskoli talks about, or at least focuses on Sister Debs Machoba, was really, really powerful for me. I just couldn't get enough of all of those images, you know, of her and her talking and people talking about her, because she's almost always been, at least for me and the things that I'm exposed to, just a silhouette, a footnote. And here you've got lots of minutes dedicated to just talking about her. And there's a point at which Mam Tembi talks about, it's just a throwaway thing. She talks about the camaraderie. I never get this word right, but she talks about the camaraderie amongst the women, and then also says, but there were also differences, but she doesn't expand, right, on what these differences are. And I think someone else then talks about Sis Debs and how Sis Debs remained in Azapo. She didn't join the ANC, despite the fact that, you know, after 94, you know, she suffered quite a lot, and she could have taken that choice to do so. And I was just thinking about how often having to because the work of undoing the erasure is such an urgent project, often you then lose out on those nuances, on those differences politically, ideologically, amongst women, right? Because Siskoli has the task of saying, firstly, these women existed just as a start, and this is often the exhausting and work that almost makes me resentful to some degree, that we really should not be doing this, but we have to. And I was thinking about that moment and contrasting it with the film from yesterday, Whispering Truth to Power, which focuses on Professor Thuli Madonsela. And there's a lot of exploration around the way in which Thuli thinks, and also nuances between herself and Wenzi Madonsela, and the ideas that drive each person. And with a film like Standing on Their Shoulders that Siskoli does, you almost don't have the space to do that, because first you have to prove that these women existed and they were there, you know. And I almost imagine that if the film about Prof. Madonsela was only done 30 years from now, it would look very different, because the filmmaker would have to first do the work of going back and saying she actually existed, you know. So that was something I really found interesting and tragic at the same time, but also really, really grateful for the work that Siskoli did in this film to dig the archives. I could see the amount of work that went into finding this archive, and I loved how it sort of blew open 1956 for me, at least from a visual perspective, because there's obviously those images that we see quite often, but then here you have this almost bursting open of these images. And I think finally, I thought it was very powerful how she juxtaposed those images. So I was having a good time looking at all of these women for about 30 minutes, and then you go to Kodesa and then you go to the union buildings, and the disappointment that comes with that. And I felt the film as a medium is very powerful in that way, because you can write about the stuff, but when you actually see it in front of your eyes, it's something else totally. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ngobakazi, for such a very rich input into the film. And I like the whole idea of how you unpack the idea of Inyathi Ibuzo Kwabaphambili. Because when I watched the film myself, looking at those images of the 1950s and coming to FISMA's fall, I saw an intergenerational conversation around the strategy, that's the struggles that women are experiencing, and coming to think of also the conversations from yesterday about the questions of power, how we struggle every day to make the rules and all, and thinking about how our everyday form of existence is sort of like a form of a struggle. Without wasting time, Dr. Danai, over to you. Dr. Danai, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now? Sorry, my connection became a bit unstable. Yes. Okay. Thank you. It's a treat to be on this panel, to be with so many people I deeply admire and adore. So I'm really grateful to be included in this conversation, and also this conversation about this really beautiful film. I thought the film was, sort of the kind of thoughtful, detailed attention to narrative making, I think, and this kind of decided point of view that is also sort of struck through with a wide range of its own interruptions, quite intentional interruptions. I thought that was quite incredible. As the title suggests, I guess the standing on shoulders, this idea of building upon, and I think where where you were struck by around the kind of intergenerational conversation. I think a lot of that is what's on my mind in terms of what's being played with, because in part we can imply a kind of foundation upon which others build, a kind of progress, up and up and away, but also I guess the implications of then also thinking about this building as building otherwise, building upon, building against, and adjacent and parallel, and the capacity to try to hold all of those gestures at once, and still produce a particular kind of narrative that a person can hold onto as well. I think in the context of the time of the film, I think that in the context of our present, I mean, I think I was struck also by the kind of framing, the time framing of feminist action around public forms of action, and particularly the use of the body in place as a particular form of making action, and I think a lot of recent discussions around the kind of tactics of forlists in particular, but also others, as we see in this time frame, in terms of using the body, but also drawing on traditions or registers or citational practices of prior moments. That are framed around this thing called public feminisms. I guess this a kind of reorienting of, at least in the mainstream conversation, it's reoriented in a sense where the public becomes the sphere, a particular set of publics, whether it's the use of Twitter or social media as it comes up, or where forms of expertise are made more available. So it's not simply the people we assume to be expert on the subject, let's say because they have this many degrees in thinking about gender, that are experts, but that people are constituting different forms and registers of expertise in different forms of publics, which produces different kinds of, I guess, presumably it spreads out the extent, but also the kind of forms of expression of what feminist actions are. And I think that at the heart of that, at the heart of thinking about the present in public feminisms, um, then there is an alive intergenerational challenge or contestation, that I think is mediated in interesting ways, and in presenting different kinds of registers of expertise through the kinds of speaking subjects named, brought to life, brought back into this project of memory, that people who've been dislodged from these projects of memory or lodged into them in a particular kind of frame. Excuse me. I thought in this sense, in terms of what the film I guess, invites us to think about is how to negotiate individual and collective efforts, or individual and collective memory, individual and collective trauma consciousness, conscientization, and I think that between those, between the individual and collective, becomes alive also are the questions of what it means to do the kind of feminist work, practice, actions that to anticipate a feminist world. I want, so I was thinking, and I think it's also came up, already in the conversation. What does memory do, and what does it mean to collect this range of archives in this kind of project of memory? So let's say 20 years from now, as was just said before, what does this film do 20 years from now? And I wonder what kinds of conversations we have to engage with it, so that the narrative that the film offers us, or the narratives plural, or the project of memory that it offers us, do something that I think part was being agitated as well. There's a way that we like to imagine things getting better over time, but if people were having the same kinds of conversations 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago, the not newness of the present, as a kind of maybe a deep skepticism about progress or our current gains, maybe that's something to hold as an orientation, and that as kind of a steady tension to this, the foundation, or these shoulders. And then just some close and initial questions. I wonder about the frame of national time, the geography of the nation itself, and how our feminist imagining is perhaps then, always already um, compromised, um, in the sense that, and so that even the telling within that frame of space and time, and then its demand for linear time frames and causal relationships, or causal, so for example, the kind of inevitability of intersectionality, because people are going to later arrive and say, but my difference matters. I wonder what I wonder what what looking to the frictions, um, as as alive, and outside of time, in the sense of outside of linear time, what that does for our imagining, as we see it in front of our eyes. I wonder also the kind of category of woman that's but stable across the accounts. I think because the register is in response to particular forms of action in relation to particular um, instantiations of patriarchy, then produce. So I wonder the instability of that category is not simply inevitable because time moves forward and then we come to recognize our difference, but that actually that these differences are explicitly connected to the ways that we come to the consciousness of ourselves, and keep alive our imagining, our disagreement, that difficult holding of not trauma bonding, but a holding of not that I'm not against trauma bonding either, but but a kind of holding of the thing that sparks the demand, and but it also refuses to be named or to be pinned down, and so this is the range of feelings and thinkings I was sitting with this film. I think I'll stop there. And Kosi.
Thank you so much, Danai, for such a brilliant contribution. Really, really moving, talking about the questions of trauma, and in particular intergenerational trauma. Over to you, Sis Xoliso.
Hello, 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 hello. I don't know what to say. I'm never lost for words. But anyway, thank you so much for the feedback and the assessment. And I got a little bit, emotional there because, often either people dissect your work when it's like a Q&A, but there's something about Zoom that also makes it very intimate, and it's like I'm speaking to someone in my own living room. So I really, really appreciate how people saw this. Sometimes when you are making films, some filmmakers are incredibly pedantic and intentional with every shot. I am not like that. I know what it is that I want to capture. I know what it is that I want to talk about, but I leave room for God to enter in my work. I leave room to be surprised. I leave room for fortuity. And so, for instance, I did not think about using the music Hamba Kahle Umkondo Wesizwe. It was part of the footage. And and then Sistenji talking about the whole notion of how they were perceived in struggle and how it connects to that. So it wasn't really intentional on my part, although I understood the masculinity of that type of motif. And it's so interesting that you enjoyed that so much. I've shown it to other friends. And one of my friends, when this film was done, I didn't have that much money. I didn't like the first film. And so I went and I looked for money to expand it in terms of wanting footage, and because I knew that it would make the film fuller. I knew that I needed to have someone like Winnie in the film. I knew that I needed to have Masi Sulu in the film. I knew that I needed to have Debs Machoba in the film, or I would have just ended with something that was not really, it's, in fact, the film is not complete. I wish I had more money, then I can actually make a better film, pay proper homage to these women, and have a theatrical release. So I'm hoping that that is still to come. I suppose, respond to, as a filmmaker, for me personally, I want to make films that I am not watching, films that are not out there. It's a challenge because films about women, you don't get as much money as you would get if you wanted to make a film on Sisulu or whoever. So that in itself is a huge challenge because our currency is not valued, basically, that one, if I want to make a film on Mandela, I might just get 5 million. And if I want to make a film on Winnie Mandela, if I'm lucky, I might get 800,000. So it's those issues that one is battling with. But it was very important for me to show a full circle and at the same time a continuous movement, how these women marched and how that created a domino effect, and how us as women, we are constantly and continuously marching. One of the things that is very, very important to me as a filmmaker, because we do research and I do research for my work, is really this thing of resisting erasure. It's just so, so important to make sure that, women and what women have contributed. In fact, Toni Morrison talks about the fact that show me any Black person and I will show you that their story is very, very interesting. It doesn't matter who it is. And we are really facing that. And I think that that's a conversation that we can have of this, whereby maybe we should look at ways of creating something to make sure that we record these women's stories, even if it's not in the form of a film, but to just make sure that we have an archive of women's lives and what women have contributed. But at the same time, I was interested in the Mampela Rampeles as well, because Mampela Rampele is one of those women who just keeps going, whether she thinks she can create a successful political party at the age of 70, she will do it regardless of what. And I just think that some of those women who are not really appreciated in terms of what it is that they have brought to the table. And Pumla says it so well in the interview when she talks about Mampela Lampele and what Mampela Lampele has achieved. So that was very important. I mean, I would have wanted to do more, but I mean, the film is dedicated to Tenjiwe Mtintso, who, in my opinion, is a very undervalued comrade in terms of what Tenjiwe has done for this country in terms of gender, in terms of how even when the Gender Commission was started, when it had teeth. During that time, Tenjiwe Mtintso was the chairperson. Tenjiwe Mtintso fought for so many things within the space of women, whether it was during apartheid or whether it was post. And she has continued, in fact, to be one of those people who fights regardless and is fearless. And I mean, of course, I happen to just love her very much. And one of the things that I love about what I do, I can just put people I want in my films. So next time when I make a feminist film, I'm just going to come and interview all of you, Sislengiwe, Babalwa. I'm just going to have you in my films because I just think that I'm just fortunate to just know these amazing women, or maybe to have access to them. And I mean, it's one of my joys actually when I do the work that I do, because I think it is just really, really important for us to resist erasure. But then again, you have Shireen Hassim, who at the very beginning, she talks about how these young people who are coming up, they are also gifting something to us as people who might have done something, might have pushed the envelope, and they have also continued to do that. I was very clear that I wanted to only have Black women in that film. I was very clear from onset. And I was clear that I did not want any men in my films. And if I did, it was only going to be Kathrada. And it's so funny because, as I said, I'm not a very pedantic filmmaker. I allow room for God to come in. I didn't know that Ahmed Kathrada drove Sophie, what's her name? Amina Kachalia's mother to the march. You know, I didn't know that, you know, he in some way or the other, he participated in that. I didn't know that he had watched those beautiful young women who talk about Remember Kwezi. And I wanted to, in fact, that documentary, because I was funded by government money, and during that time, it was a very difficult time politically. So I didn't mention the president's name in that, simply because I was getting money from government. And I was like, oh my goodness. So how am I going to deal with this? So I just simply had Simamkele talk about how they went and they raised placards, and she said, oh, we understood that that man was going to speak. Because I felt that because, you know, people have to see and say, okay, and approve. There's that editorial thing that sometimes goes on. Although I have to say that I am very, very lucky that I never have that much of a problem. But I just felt that, okay, if I mention this name of this man, then I might not get money, or the last truncheon of my money for my film, you know. And I knew that either maybe I was going to be asked to take that off. So you know, it was one of those things where you're like, you want to make the film, how can you creatively make the film without mentioning, because, you know, it depends who's giving you the money, as long as what it is that you are trying to do is going to speak to what you are trying to achieve. So I don't know. I mean, I'm better at answering questions. It's still a film in the making. I'm hoping that one day someone is just going to give me 5 million and I am just going to bring it to the screen, improve it. The other last thing, when I went back, was the first, and then I was criticized by one of my friends. Why are you having the song Mkondo Wesi's where is the PAC in this? And what people don't understand is I have a friend of mine who did a documentary on Sobukwe. There is nothing. There is nothing in the public archives. So I was fortunate to then get Loretta Ngobo saying something from, Loretta Ngobo's daughter. I was very fortunate, but still, she doesn't speak to the Women's March because there was nothing. I really wanted to be as inclusive as possible, but there was nothing on so many women. So more so for us to really, really record women's stories, not for ourselves, but actually for the sake of posterity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sis Xoli. It's such a great pleasure to have you here engaging us on your film. And thank you, Danai and Ngabakazi, for this conversation. And it is most important to learn about the contribution of the film industry, not only from the films that we're discussing today, but the ones that we discussed tomorrow, that we discussed yesterday, in terms of being intentional and deliberate about women's voices, being intentional and deliberate about the constant fight against the erasure, and Siskoli for going back into the archive and pulling out those voices and those images that are constantly being erased from the public spaces. And for me, the most important part of bringing these conversations together and having some of the people who participated in this struggle speaking for themselves is the importance of the archive of not only documenting this history for ourselves, one, for correcting the narrative, but also for making sure that we own our voices, we document our histories so that our stories are not distorted in future. So I'm going to read some few questions from the chat session. And colleagues, please feel free to continue populating the chat session for engagements and discussions. So from Prof. Pumla, I have a question for you, Ngabakazi, and a question for Danai. So the question for Ngabakazi is, when Xolisa was speaking about deliberately resisting erasure in this specific form, but all her larger filmography, I couldn't help thinking about what you say about Debs Machoba's repeated appearance in the film. That's a question for Ngabakazi. And for Danai, what do you say about what gets transmitted in dynamic and also instructive ways across different generations and different generations of women activists? What do you think this film creates in relation to the specific engagements with memory or publicness that you saw differently and powerfully spoke to in your opening remarks? Thank you.
Hello. Okay, my video won't start, but whoever is hosting can just link me up. So I'll just talk in the meantime. I think for me, as someone who came into politics via the Black consciousness tradition, seeing a film in which someone like Sis Debs is included because already there's the struggle in films about anti-apartheid, struggles that focus very much on the ANC, and there will be very little said about all the other nationalist movements, and so already there is that problem, let alone the women who were part of those movements. And so to see Sis Debs alongside all of these other women, as well as the inclusion of Mam Loretta Ngobo, and specifically the filmmaker deciding to tell us that she is from the PAC, whereas the dominance of the ANC is obviously very, very felt in a lot of the films that we see. And so for me, it really was just an emotive response to it, but also just thinking that it could only have been a feminist filmmaker who would have managed to excavate this archive and make sure that there is substantial time invested to a woman like a Debs Machoba. Yeah.
I'll come in. In terms of thinking, the appearances of Deb, for me, I found it unnerving and undoing almost, and I think it's because it's like because it undoes so much of what one expects of these kinds of films that then that it's not even just the appearance, but also the how that she appears, and then the questions that are posed about all of it in those moments of appearance. I think that undoing is that thing when something that's affirming in a way that's not been affirming prior happens, and it undoes you because because it points to the to aspects of what when we get used to particular kinds of public conversation that are where we also then become sort of even complicit in forms of erasure, because you're so used to a particular form of doing a conversation that the shock of the surprise, it can be the most subtle thing, that's a surprise of doing it in a different kind of way, but it reminds you of the prior thing that like numbed you in the first place. And I think that unnerving or undoing, that capacity for unnerving and undoing, I think that's what I find interesting about how doing national time frame, of what is politics, and what do we think of women's politics is undone also, is like, or unbundled, or like when you pull a scab, I think in the film. In terms of the question around memory and publicness, so I'm like, I'm starting to be one of, I think I'm starting to think very slowly as a person, and so so sometimes I feel like memory is anticipated. There's a anticipation of memory that's almost and maybe it's also a hunger we have, but also maybe it's also a way that we know well to close things off. And so for me, there's a part of me that's, I'm not ready for memory to be part of some of the conversations we're having, even though I'm using the words. And I think what I'm trying to think about is, what is the time of the present and the time of the past as it's given to us, as we come to understand our location in it. I don't know if I'm ready for memory yet. If I'm still coming to terms or coming to grasp the present and the way it's so contaminated and I don't know. So memory becomes this. Whereas I think around the publicness, I guess part of it is, what are the stakes of multiplying registers of expertise? So my child is 11. She looks at a video on somewhere. She says something about it, and then in the present, that's something that can access a particular kind of discursive formation of a feminist action that maybe looked different 30 years ago or whatnot. And so part of me, I guess the stakes are that what does it mean for the question of experience, which is often where we get our sense of consciousness come from. What is the sense between that connection between experience and that movement in your gut and the things you know somehow, even though they're not immediate to your own memory, your own individual memory, but they're part of a collective memory that you hold because you're living the consequences and breathing them constantly. Um, and that we access in different kinds of ways, and then the ways we're allowed to speak multiplying, and then but also being contained into even words that sometimes we don't also fully understand ourselves, but they're the words we know to attach a feeling to because we don't yet have a word. I feel like I've been incoherent, but you know, it's life.
Thank you, Ngabakazi. Thank you, Danai. And colleagues, please feel free to use the chat session to engage and also to raise your hands. I think you can, to ask questions or to engage. I have a question for you, Siskoli. Sorry for abusing my power as the moderator. I was thinking about the title when I was watching the film yesterday, and I know that you said you don't wake up in the morning to say, I'm going to do A, B, and C. You allow the forces of creativity to prevail and to lead you into making films. So for me, standing on their shoulders, I'm interested after watching the film in terms of what did you mean? Did you have it in the mind? Sort of like when you were thinking about that the kind of a form that you wanted to create, or is it a title that came after you had engaged all the content that is in the form? But most important for me, I'm interested in understanding what is in this title, because I can see that from where I'm standing, it's not just a title. Standing on their shoulders is a very powerful message. So I'm interested in knowing, maybe if you can unpack the title for us. Thank you.
Okay, one of the things that I am consciously aware of throughout my life is the fact that I am here because other people made it possible for me to be here. And I have always been the sort of person who really wants to show gratitude. And I'm the sort of person, if you are so nice to me today, I'll go and pray and I'll say, God, please give me an opportunity one day when I can return that favor. Because, you know, I grew up in Zimbabwe. I was educated in Zimbabwe. I went there at the age of 3. And there's a very strong saying in Zimbabwe which says, kusatenda uroi, meaning that to be ungrateful in life and to be unthankful, it's tantamount to kutakata. So I have always wanted to do something where I'm just saying thank you, you know? So this title was a no-brainer for me, because at the end of the day, you know, there are a lot of factors that comes into whether it's me doing well or I'm perceived as being successful. I don't think I'm particularly smart. I don't think that I'm smarter than other filmmakers. I really don't. I really just think that I got a great lottery ticket at birth. Yes, I've worked in my craft, but when I came to this country, I was 28, meeting my father for the first time, and I made friends who grew me in terms of understanding how gender has worked. I became very close to Tenjiwe Mtinso, not because she particularly liked me. I just hounded her. And I just said, you're not going to ignore me. I really like you. I respect you. I will make tea for you. I'll do anything. So somewhere along the line, there has always been a sense of gratitude. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Whereby I feel that I am where I am because there are people who are making it possible. In as much as namhlanje, I am doing this festival with the most dynamic team of women. That in itself is, I'm like a pig in shit. And I'm very grateful because so many people want they do festivals. I was struggling for years and I feel I have found a home That can be academic, you've got feminists, but you've got left thinkers, because I'm left myself. So standing on their shoulder, my sister, was a no-brainer. Umuntu, you must always be thankful. You must always be, you know what I'm trying to say? These women achieved amazing inroads with very, very little. So I get strength from that, but at the same time, it's my way of just saying thank you. And we are continuing and continuing and continuing.
Thank you, Sis Xoli. We still have like 5 minutes to wrap up this session. So questions still welcome. There is a comment from the session from Unomalanga, and she says, to be unthankful is a form of witchcraft. It is a way of narcissism to not see those that have been around you, that you have stood on. We stand on the shoulders of others indeed, and we must know that. And Danai, you said it's also heavy to have someone standing on you. So while we welcome more comments and questions, Danai and Ragazi, do you want to comment on the title itself, on standing on someone's shoulders, standing on their shoulders?
I was just smiling now at Danai's contribution in the chat group about how heavy it must be for someone to be standing on your shoulders, and the pressure that comes with, you know. And I guess Nam, in my interpretation of the theme, or the title rather, I've been thinking more of that idea of building on these people and the expectation that we have of them, but also the importance of us learning, but never really thinking around the burden of the possible burden of what that could mean. So I think both things are interesting to me, both ways of thinking about it. That it's important for us, you know, in a very literal and just seeing the visual, physical standing on someone's shoulders, and therefore being able to see what is coming. Because just thinking about our own experiences in the movements that I was a part of, and in the ways in which we engaged or did not with women's archives, and certain things that we could not have seen because we were literally not, in many ways, standing on the shoulders of the movements were very masculinized in the way in which they thought about whose intellectual work was worthy of engaging with, whose face would end up on a poster, that sort of thing, and therefore we missed a lot of things that we could have seen coming our way had we been standing firmer on the shoulders of others, because then you're able to, you don't have to experience everything yourself, but rather take caution from what history tells you. And of course, part of it is the fact that the issue of access to some of the stuff. But yeah, so I thought about it in that sense, about myself and women like Pagama, and how we started seeing the world very differently, having initially not thought of ourselves as standing on or just understanding the expansiveness of the women who are there. Because what ends up happening is that you pick individual women, but you don't actually have a sense of what is out there until you, of who is out there rather, until you see a film such as this one that then reveals so much more to you. Yeah.
Can I just quickly come in there? You see, when we talk about standing on their shoulders, really, we are talking about the notion that there were people who were there before us. and we are building on what it is that they had created. And then it just continues, it just gets better and better. So whether it's having a woman who ran as a parliamentarian or the first Black woman to go to university, and then you are like, no, I also want to go to university because someone has done it. That's really the notion in which I'm looking at. Then there is the other notion. For instance, Alice Walker talks about how for her, she doesn't want to be a role model. And I'm like that. When people say that I am a role model, no, I don't want to be anybody's role model, because you are pigeoning me. If tomorrow I choose to marry a woman, am I still going to be your role model? People who are looking for role models, they should be looking for that from their caregivers. Although, of course, I myself, I've got a couple of people I are my role models. Someone like Pumla, I always wish that God had made me as smart or half as smart like Pumla. We are born. But anyway, I am not. But coming back to what I'm saying is that I am very clear that I have no desire to be anyone's role model. I am open and welcome to women, especially younger women. But please don't say that I'm your role model. I am complex. I am messed up. You know what I'm trying to say? I am not, just because I make nice films or films that you like, once you get to know me, and I have learned that because I have worked for phenomenal women in this world, phenomenal. And if you ask me, do I like half of those women? No, actually, I don't. And before that, I was like, oh my God, if only I could work with so-and-so, if only this, if only that. But I also understand their importance within the space in which we are existing as women. So I think, it's a choice how you, for me, it's, I gain inspiration every time I speak to Sophie Williams de Brain. I adore Tenjuem, so I sit at her feet and I say, please tell me that, what was it like? But do I want to be like her? No, I don't. So it's really working on what people gave of themselves. People like Pregs Govender, who is so uncelebrated, who was the head of that organization that did phenomenal work during the time when we gained independence. All of that. But do I really, really, really want to be those women? No. And it's okay. I just love them, I admire them, and I take energy from what it is that they created. So that's how I see it.
I was gonna chime in quickly if the chair lets me. Like, I love and admire you very much, but I won't say you're my role model because you told me not to say that. But I was thinking around the title. I think also the generosity of bringing a full and vulnerable and contradictory self, and being open to disagreements and contestations, because it's not about my ego, it's about my commitment to my vulnerability with you. I think that as a gesture of what it means to if we're going to be standing on each other, it's also very intimate to be the whole body, figuring out your thighs and everything. If we're going to be doing all of that, I think it demands a particular kind of generosity and gentleness and vulnerability as a form of relation to one another.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are at 1:15, and on the chat session, Unomalanga says, stunning must fall, totally toxic nonsense, to project fantasy on other women instead of just treating them as human like you, which worked hard within their flaws. And yes, and Asipe says, Mamkoli, the pressure that comes with being a role model, it puts one on the pedestal of perfect. While watching the film, it looks like me to the thinking about how there's been an emergence of female artists protesting and subverting the crippling effects of masculinity. It's a very beautiful conversation, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us for the first session of day 2. Please stay with us as we take a 5 minutes break. We are back at 1:20, and we have a masterclass with Ubongi Weselani. So please don't go away, take a break and come back and join us. We continue the conversation. Thank you. And to our panelists, Danai, Nbagazi, and Sistoli, thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation. We really appreciate for blessing us with your presence, and we really appreciate your rich engagement. Thank you so much.
Hello, am I in the right one?
Yes,
hello, hello.
yes.
I am. I found it. Hi.
Hi.
Yes, Bogi, you look gorgeous. Yo, I'm just in love with all the women in this thing, in this festival. All of them are so beautiful and smart, Bongi. Yo, they are so smart. I am like a pig in shit, I'm telling you, Bongi. This is the best thing that could have happened to my tiny, tiny, tiny festival.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations.
Amazing. No, but you know, it's an amazing team of, I mean, we are on break now, so I can tell you. It's just such an amazing team of women, eh?
Oh, wonderful.
Nelson Mandela University. And so this was, what do you call it? Like a trial, like, what do you call it when you start something? And hopefully we will have a long-term relationship where we will actually next year create a bigger and better, and you know, but it's just been amazing, the discussions, and it's nice. And most of these women are academics, but it's accessible to students, to, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Nice, because, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
How are you?
I am, I've been running around with all my funding applications, and the Joburg Film Festival, of course, launched yesterday in a very small format, because we're only focusing on youth and audience development. So we're having our workshops today and tomorrow at the Joburg Theatre. And we're only screening 3 films under a specific theme of displacement. And yeah, and we've got the Lesotho film, the one that's been considered for the Oscars. This is not a burial, it's a resurrection.
Okay, I'm quiet, so I'll give those people now. I'm sure they want to start. We'll speak Mina Nawe afterwards. I'm just excited to see you.
I'm excited to see you. Hi, Hlengiwe, and everyone.
Hi, colleagues. We are back. It's 1:20, and we are here for our masterclass. For the masterclass, I present to you Ubongiwe Silane, an award-winning producer who has produced across several mediums, including commissioned serial content for Africa's largest TV broadcaster, multiple short films, a feature film, and a documentary series. Her credits and accolades include Culture Shock, the 2013 SAFTA winner for the Best Reality Show, Best South African Short Film at the Durban International Film Festival in 2015 for Unomalanga and the Witch. A documentary series titled Great Africans, as well as NFVF's Female-Only Filmmakers Project, and a series of 26 short narrative films by women. Happiness is a 4-letter word. Everyone who has read the book is her debut feature film, was released in February 2016 to box office success. Bongiwe is an alumni at the Durban Formats, La Institute de Cinéma de Français, as well as Produra also. In 2018, she graduated from the EAVE Producers Workshop. On top of producing, Bongiwe is the festival director of the Joburg Film Festival. So for the next 20 minutes, we have Bongiwe on the platform giving us her masterclass. And if you were here yesterday and you attended the masterclass with Shupesh, you will know that these masterclasses are not only a space for information, but also an educational space, but also a transformative space for young film producers and those who want to learn from these platforms. Over to you, Bongiwe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me properly. Am I audible? Okay, great stuff. So thank you for the beautiful introduction, and good afternoon to everybody who's here, and for really giving me the honor to do this talk. I'm not sure what the masterclass entails, but I thought I'll just talk about myself and my thoughts and the reason why stories and filmmaking excite me. So my name is Bongiwe. I was born and bred in Johannesburg. I live there with my husband and my children. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I'm all those things that make me very proud of being a woman. I graduated from film school, but spent the early parts of my career working in broadcasting as a commissioning editor, channel executive for Mnet for nearly 10 years. And since 2010, I've been producing independently. My producing credits that you mentioned include Culture Shock, which was a docu-reality show for the launch of Mzansi Magic when it launched in 2009. I also won Best South African Short Film at the Durban Film Festival. The film was directed by Palisa Shongwe, and it was part of the female-only filmmaker slate. And I executive produced the Pan-African documentary series called Great Africans, which was really a profile of 7 African icons, including Nelson Mandela, Emperor Haile Selassie, Wangari Maathai, Julius Nyerere, and Wole Soyinka. Are you still there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, no, she was just stuck on the screen. Sorry. I was the first recipient of the filmmaker slate that NFVF launched in 2014, I think, which was really an important intervention by government to upskill and bring out the creative talent among women. So between 2014 and 2016, I produced 26 short films by women, written and directed by women, and all my crew HODs had to be women. And of course, I'm probably best known for my debut feature film, which is called Happiness is a Four-Letter Word, which was released in 2016. I graduated from the London College of Arts, and I'm an alumni of the Venice Biennale Cinema College, La Fabrique Cinema du Monde, which is a producer training program that runs during the Cannes Film Festival. And in 2018, I was awarded a full scholarship by Creative Media Europe to attend IAVE, which stands for European Audiovisual Entrepreneurs. So that's really my kind of career background. But at heart, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, I realize dreams. That's what I like calling myself, enabling of dreams. When people come to me with scripts, and just seeing them from the page to the screen is probably the most fulfilling thing for me. And I love what I do. I don't think there was ever any doubt in my mind that I wanted to be in the film and TV business. It may have taken me a while after film school to figure out what is it within this field that I wanted to do, but I think I thrive more within the kind of deal-making aspect of filmmaking, which is funding and putting people and projects together. For many of us who started in the industry almost 20 years ago, I think it's important to note that the relatively predictable world that we knew growing up making films is perhaps a thing of the past. Everything is changing, the world is changing, and closer to us, content is also changing. Content consumption is changing, and the way we are creating content is vastly being dictated by our audiences, and they too are forever evolving. The new streaming services coming into the market are also changing what we thought was the norm, not only in the content we're consuming, but how we're making it and where we are watching it. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple TV are all making us think differently about what we do. I'd like to think that these are extreme conditions that we as filmmakers find ourselves in, but we have to be ready and prepared for them. Even the best and brightest creatives in the world are having to rethink how they're doing things. And the challenge for us, I think, as filmmakers and those that are coming into the filmmaking space, is that nothing is as clear cut as it used to be. So what then is our role? Nina Simone put it very clearly, and it's something that I kind of live by, is that an artist's duty is to reflect the times. And this is true of every artist, and we as filmmakers think of ourselves as artists. We must choose to reflect the times and the situations that we find ourselves in. It is our duty. These are crucial times in our lives, and in these desperate times when every day is a matter of survival on many fronts, funding, lack of funding, and all those things that confront us as filmmakers, I don't think any of us can help but to be involved in making a difference and making a change and finding new ways of doing things. Our duty as filmmakers is most importantly to shape and mold the world and not let the outside world dictate and mold it for us. Which is why I wanted to just kind of sidetrack and talk about authenticity of the African story. It couldn't possibly be that simple. Why the conversation around authenticity in African story cannot be simple? What makes an African story genuine? When we talk about African cinema, what is it that makes it African cinema? Why is that authentic? How do we reflect these times I talk about? Is it the costuming in the film? Is it the language in the films that the language that is used in the film, the locations, the cultural references or the appropriations of symbols? Does authentic African stories mean a whitewashing of reality as it exists? Because the truth is that the news images that we see on television of young Africans dying on the seas in search of a better life, the stories of the hush puppies of Nigeria fleecing innocent people through online scams, the daily stories of government corruption and leaders who siphon the public treasury, or the stories of slave queens and cults, are all very real too. They are not manufactured, they exist. These are the stories of Africa, but they do not make up the sum total of the African story. This is what I think. Along with the hush puppies of the world, the corruption stories, the slave queens, etc., are also many stories of enterprise and innovation, of exploits in entrepreneurship, technology, medicine, literature, sports. And of course, the many beautiful films that make it to International Film Festival. Many innovators and solutionists are all over the continent, creating wealth through ideas that are homegrown and primarily servicing local communities. For every young man who has chosen to ride a floater across the Mediterranean to France or to Italy or to the UK, there are others that are choosing to harness opportunities locally and to build a different reality than they met on ground. So the stories of Africa only conflicts the African story through whose lens it is told. The real truth is that the African story, historical or contemporary, is also incredibly complex, sometimes confounding, but full of options. As a producer, I make it a point to pay attention to stories, to conversations, to characters, to sound. I make it a point to observe, to listen, to read, and to try to find and isolate moments that speak to something about my world and my reality and the reality that I want to give to the world. And most importantly, the reality that speaks to my humanity. I've been to far-flung places across the continent and simply embraced experiences. Because I was paying attention, I also found magic in the contradictions, the mundane and the beauty in the ordinary that can be found in African communities. That is how and why I've been able over 20 years career as a producer to always be excited by our stories and the dramatic nature of our history and our worldview. What then do I say to the filmmaker of today for the future? What can they expect, or how can they embrace it and forge forward to continue this passion that is filmmaking? For me, I think collaboration is very key. Working together and creating communities that have a common goal and a vision is what the future filmmaker needs to embrace. I don't do what I do alone. No one does, because realizing a film or a TV series, whatever it is that we're doing in the visual medium, is a collaborative process, literally. I think the other most important thing is being entrepreneurial about how we are realizing our projects and always being on the lookout for new funding opportunities and models. Sadly, private and government funding is slowly not being available for us because globally, government priority are shifting towards more important issues. The coronavirus, global warming. Quite honestly, it's going to be a hard road going forward. The other important thing is problem solving, which is going to be a key practice and will require mastery, working together and alongside each other to solve real world challenges through the art of entertainment is now part of us shaping our world. There's a growing body of research that supports the importance of the creative disciplines contributing as remedies to our multiple challenges in an unpredictable world. And I think this is very key for me, is supporting each other. understanding that working in silos is destructive rather than progressive. The importance of us as filmmakers also supporting other films, watching South African films, watching our colleagues' films, so that we can see what our audiences are paying attention to. But most importantly, watch how we can improve on this authentic African story that we are all craving for. We will need to embrace a counterculture because we now require an even stronger fortitude of character than that which you and I may have needed to face the challenges of a topsy-turvy world which seems to be careening towards greater levels of chaos, even quicker than we ever anticipated. But I am and I continue to be greatly encouraged by the new talent coming into the industry. I work a lot in development, youth development. I call myself an enabler of dreams because I feel like us in this generation of filmmakers have to prepare the groundwork for the braver, new emerging filmmakers that are coming. And as chaotic as it is, it's also truly exciting to see filmmakers who are embracing the future, embracing new technologies with a spirit of eagerness and finding multiple solutions to life, multiple solutions to live and to make films. The number of South African films that have come out in the past 10 years is testament to this, and how multiple TV channels are also embracing local stories, making it easier and exciting for us to be in this industry. What we would all like to see is all these young filmmakers and the new generation of filmmakers coming up, is them becoming a little bit more centered and steadfast in the belief that they have a role to play in the new African story, this new authentic African story that we need to be telling and not letting the West tell it for us. Thank you so much for affording me this opportunity. I hope that this was amazing for you, or at least interesting, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Oniwe, for such a very interesting engagement. We have learned a lot from your presentation. And if there are young upcoming filmmakers on the platform, I think they would really appreciate this opportunity. And colleagues, please feel free to engage on the chat session, but also, yes, on the Q&A, so you can raise your hand, I think, and ask questions. It is such a great honor to have you here. Mrs. Bongi, were educating us and teaching us. And I think I liked the whole idea, the fact that you are sharing from your own journey, because then if you share from your own journey, it has that sense of, I don't know how to call it, but the intimacy of the story to the story, to say you are speaking from your own experiences. So the authenticity that you're talking about of the story. But before I open,
there is a question.
I can see the hands
from Baba Lwa.
Yes, I can see the hand from Baba Lwa. Doc, you can chip in.
Thank you so much, Bongiwe. I really, really enjoyed your presentation. And I have been following your work from my couch most of the time. So it's good to finally put the face to the name that we see daily in our screens. But my question is around the idea of the influence and the impact of, you've already started talking about it in terms of Netflix, but the influence of social media, especially the issue of followers, more than the actual qualification of the people who are now on our screens. I've heard and I've seen lots of our artists, trained artists who have been vocal about the idea of fame and followers have translated to people being artists in a way, occupying most of the screen that was normally occupied by people who were trained in the art. What does that mean about the future of our arts, and also the kind of training that we need for the arts in this country and continent? To be honest, it's going on worldwide, but there's a serious concern. I don't know whether maybe, obviously it's capitalism. It is looking for people who can attract whatever. It doesn't matter what they carry between their ears. So I'm just interested in your view around that, because there are lots of people who have been complaining around this. Thank you.
Yes, I probably think I've been one of the producers who's also been, I won't use the word attacked, but with my feature film, one of the cast members actually was not kind of known as an actress, but I had a huge following on social media. Sadly, I think a lot of times these considerations are made because of the marketing strategy of a project, because there's so much money and I suppose a risk factor that's given into you get a lot of noises of how are we going to make sure that, what are the marketing tools for this film? How are we going to make sure that audiences come into the cinema and give us our money back? So, I mean, I think it is a reality that we face as producers. And it comes with the fact that, if we had a very clear, I suppose, funding structure that really dictates what is it that can be done and cannot be done. But I'm really of the opinion that, we need to be building the industry in all its facets. Actors are very important. I know people who just kind of wake up and send me a CV, can I be an actress? And I'm like, no, you have to study. You really have to study the craft. And we see it a lot with international stars like Lupita Nyong'o, who went to Harvard and got a master's degree in acting. And it only just builds your profile. So really my opinion on it is that it shouldn't be happening. But there are many factors that really dictate how these considerations are made in terms of who is going to make the money come back. And I'm putting it quite flippantly and simply, that these kind of social media influencers making their way to the screen becomes a way to get the dollars back. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question well. I guess I'm also just giving my overall opinion on this phenomenon that we're facing, which has many facets to it. And I don't know if there is there's a solution to it, quite honestly.
Thank you, Sis Boniwe. There was a question from Usisoli that says, how do we balance commercial storytelling with very, very important work that does not make money?
Very, very.
And then there is another question from, I can't see who is it from, but the question says, hi, Sis Boniwe. I would like to ask, what would be your advice for young filmmakers? What challenges can they expect when they enter the industry, and how can they access funding opportunities for their films? So I'll leave you with those two for now. Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to start off with the balance of commercial versus, I suppose, artistic, and kind of really the kind of stories we want to tell, but they're not necessarily commercial. I think I was involved in this film that we premiered at the Joburg Film Festival, but it didn't premiere. It's been all over the world. It was developed through the Venice Biennale Cinema College. And it premiered in Sundance, and it's the first Lesotho film to be considered for an Academy Award. And it's an incredibly important film, and one that I know that I got involved in because I believed in the fact that that story needed to be told. And it has to be, you know, I think the balance comes in us as filmmakers also deciding what is important at the time. You know, I talked about this, the dictation of this is Africa, this is what we're expecting from Africa. I think we fought that narrative of the sheikhs and the AIDS images of Africa, and now are trying to bring forth a modern kind of, not necessarily modern, but in the Africa of now as it affects us as Africans. And starting to see that movement in terms of the kind of stories that are being told. And a lot of filmmakers are braving that. They're braving the fact that we cannot have broadcast executives dictating for us that your film's got to be A, B, and C, it's got to be commercial, because that's their strategy. But us as filmmakers have to have a collective strategy of what is it that we want to put out to the world. And it's a decision we have to take and know that there's a risk involved, obviously, but at the same time, and the risk, of course, again, it boils down to the capitalism of it, the money of it. But at the same time, we have a duty to reflect the times and our lives as we want to reflect them. I hope that answers that question, Sistoli. The other one, if I can remember possibly, is about my experiences and what are the challenges that I've faced. I mean, I think the most important one, and I'm sure most female filmmakers will feel this, is the fact that I do operate and work in an incredibly male-dominated space. There are a lot of female producers coming up in the fore. We're really pushing our way, but unfortunately the decisions around the funding and the content and what we are making is still very much lies with the men. So that's a challenge, that's a barrier that we need to break. And saying that, on the other hand, we're very lucky in South Africa in the fact that there's been a lot of government intervention with transformative policies around who gets the funding for films. We've got, you know, the NFVF and the DTI, they have their initiatives, they have like these incentives where they are promoting Black filmmakers in ways that 10 years ago wasn't even possible. And I think these are the opportunities that filmmakers need to really tap into. I know often the barrier for them is they can't fill out the application form, or they think it's about going there with a PowerPoint to present, but a lot of it is so kind of nitpicky and ticking the boxes and getting those documents and things like that. But once they're done and you know what, and the most amazing thing is that these institutions are so accessible. If you don't understand anything, you just pick up a phone and say, I don't know what you're asking me for, and they will get it. So that's something we need to also celebrate, the fact that there has been intervention that is helping us get to where we are getting through government, the transformation, being female, being Black. You know, it puts me in a bit of an advantage in terms of getting the funding that I need. But what's important is doing the work to get that funding. I forgot the third one, sorry.
Okay, the other one was saying, okay, the one from Alway to So you have responded to the part about funding,
Mhm.
and there was advice about filmmakers, and the challenges one we have already responded. But there is another question, if I may add, from Unomalanga, that says there is an explosion of vernacular YouTube homemade films, Nollywood style. Is this a potential area of organic growth, or is it seen more like just the bedroom studio equivalent of the hip hop scene?
Hip hop scene. I think there is an incredible space for this kind of content, this kind of really authentic. This is where, for me, the authenticity of it also lies in, is that we're starting to embrace our language, our culture, our music, and everything that we do, and really presenting to the world unapologetically. And this is really how Nollywood was built. It is the third biggest film industry in the world. And it was built by the creators and the creators, the creatives and the filmmakers and creators of that content, believing in the fact that there is an audience for this. You know, the other very important thing about filmmaking, and as a producer, this is something I've had to literally learn and continue reminding myself, is that I don't make content for myself. Yes, it might be born in me, the idea of a film, or it might come from an experience I had, an observation I had. But in crafting that story, we have to be constantly and always continuously thinking about who's going to watch this film, and really understanding the audience that you, as a producer, as a filmmaker, you want to cater for. So we know that there's an implosion of the YouTube. I have two sons who don't have DSTV. They're always on their laptops watching YouTube. So there is an audience for that content, and it's being consumed, and it is monetizing. Then there's, you know, the kind of television audience, where you also know that if you want your film to be on Showmax or Netflix, before you even submit an idea to them, they send you a profile of their audiences, that we don't know what your idea is yet, but please consider that this is the person who's going to be watching your content. And that's a very important, and it's actually quite hard to learn, not even learn, but to kind of grasp as you go, because you're always thinking that stories are, you know, I have a lot of people who send me scripts and ideas, and they say, this is such an important story, you know, it's inspired by my grandmother, you know, who lived there, and like, I mean, which is all well and good. But my first question would be, who's it for? Who are you making it for? Who's going to go and see it? So that becomes the crux of it all.
Thank you. So there is another question. I did say to you, Sis Bongwe, that having you here is a great privilege, because we are here to learn. You have young, curious, upcoming producers and filmmakers who are interested in learning, and especially because women like you, like Osusole, and all of you up there, you are breaking boundaries, you are disrupting spaces that have been seen as sort of like patriarchal spaces. So there is a question from Mate that says,
Yes.
being in a male-dominated space makes me curious about the actual strategies women producers are coming up with to navigate themselves. In my mind, I'm assuming men making decisions in some golf club.
You know, I think, Matt, I think you've put it to its point. Like, it, unfortunately, it does get to be that. Is that the decision makers, and I'm going to name some of these. If you look at the decision makers at your big broadcasters who are Pan-African, they're literally servicing an entire continent, lies with males. They might have female commissioning editors and, you know, those that will respond to your email, but it's the top guys, you know, the Jan du Plessis and the right up there, who ultimately sign your contract or make sure that you get to make that content. And it's infuriating but it is what we are dealing with. And, you know, I think it's very important that we as female filmmakers, again, I talked about this, I talked about not working in silos, I talked about collaborating. I find that producing often can be an incredibly lonely job, because you're alone, you're making decisions, you're frustrated alone. But if there was a collective, there were people that you can tap into and say, listen, I've got this challenge, I'm dealing with this, how do I navigate that? And we need to start that. We have industry bodies like the IPO and all these the structures, but perhaps, and I'm not against having one that literally looks at the female agenda. I'm very also excited about what Swift is doing, which is the sisters working in the entertainment industry, and it's a very young organization, but in terms of the inroads they've had in having certain policies changed, you know, the whole kind of sexual harassment policies that we've got to have on set now, and engaging government to make sure that funding, before you get that money, you actually have to sign a form that says, this will not happen in my set, because as women, we've faced those challenges. So I think that it is a challenge currently, this kind of decisions lying within this golf club. And we need to push a different agenda for filmmakers. And really our role, I think, is just to try and see if we can pave the way for the new generation to really have a much more leveler playing field and a fairer space to play in.
Thank you. Colleagues, we still have a couple of like 5 minutes to engage. You can type your questions, you can raise a hand and engage directly.
I have one from Olwetu around Hollywood actors and actresses getting roles in films in Africa. Yeah. Again, sadly, this is about how a film is made. So a lot of times, in South Africa in particular, we are quite far ahead in having what we call co-production treaties with countries like France, like the Netherlands, like Canada. We don't have one with Hollywood, which is a much more kind of commercially driven, it's commercially driven, but also the funding structures of how films are made in America is very different in that it's a lot of private money. But the casting of Hollywood actors and actresses in a South African production is really dictated by who has brought the money into the production and how they want that film to play out in their countries. So for instance, I have a film, and I'll talk with my experience. I'm currently doing a co-production with France and the Netherlands. We have a treaty with them, but in terms of this, if let's say the money that I get, I have to spend some of it in that country. It can either be technically, or I can bring an actress to play a South African role. And often that's what is at play when these things happen. It's about how that film is going to play out in its co-producing country and not necessarily here. And a lot of like films like Long Walk to Freedom, that was very much a play because it was funded mostly by American money, and America wanted the film to succeed in America. That's why they cast, you know, the big Hollywood names.
Any more questions, colleagues, engagements? You can raise your hands. We still have like 3 minutes left before we close this session.
Can I ask a question? I can't type it.
Sure.
Ask, but I can. What Bongiwe is also not telling everyone here is that there was a program that Mnet used to have called Mnet New Directions before a lot of Black people somehow, because we were always kept out of these spaces. And that project or that program was supposed to incubate filmmakers. And it was started by Letebela Masemola Jones, and then Bongiwe took over that. I am a product of that program when Letebela was there, and I've achieved quite okay in the film industry. And Bongiwe really mentored quite a few filmmakers who have now gained a lot, you know what I mean, like prominence, serious prominence in the film industry, because those programs were there. And now, unfortunately, those programs are not there, where you work with the support of a broadcaster and someone like Bongiwe, and you develop your film from beginning, from development right to the screen. And I did that project as a trainee producer under Richard Green, and I did it for 8 months, and I learned so much properly how to be a producer. And Bongiwe was there doing this project, and so many people in the industry. It was Letebela and Bongiwe who we really, really, really need to say thank you. And they are quite successful now, and I'm one of them. So she is modest. She truly, truly is a person who believes in developing and dreams and in being an enabler. I've seen her, I've seen it when she was working on the 26 films done by women. Sometimes she'd be in tears because sometimes they were really giving her a tough time, but she was
That's
coming
so
from
true.
a place of say, and she said, I don't know what to do, and Mina, I am boom, 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 boom. Just do it, just do it. So, you know, we truly are, you know, in the midst of someone who really has paved the way for so many filmmakers, especially women. And the whole idea of the gender department at the Nelson Mandela University is to really showcase women like you, Bongiwe, and to really say thank you, you know. And I'll be the first person to say thank you, Mtanase Kaya, because I know there's so many people that you have paved the way, young as you are. So we can't wait to see what you are going to do in the next 50 years.
Thank you so much. I'm really humbled, and I forgot to mention New Directions. I think it really was that, you know, in your career, that one thing that made me decide what is it that I want to be remembered for as a woman filmmaker, and it's always about paying it forward and developing and knowing that, you know, my career is going to stop at some point, but whoever is coming or whoever is entering the industry is enabled to do that. There's one last question, and I think it probably is a good note to leave on the NFVF Female Filmmaker Project. So, like I said, it was an amazing intervention by government, the Department of Arts and Culture, and of course the NFVF, to focus on women, to say this industry is not just made up about men, you know, it's also made up of women, and where are they? So you can either apply as a writer or as a director, and it runs, it's a year-long program, very much modeled like, I think for me, it was really like my other New Directions. You submit a one-page synopsis, and if it's chosen after a pitch to the NFVF and the producers, they run it every 3 years. So I was the first one. I know right now they've opened I think there is a new producer who's going to open a call, because the last one after me is finished her 26. So you are literally mentored by industry experts, script editors, director mentors, from the page of your script right up to its realization when it's shot. And, you know, these films also make it to film festivals. The whole idea is that the short film becomes your calling card. because it's so hard to get into the industry. You apply for a job and say, I want to be a writer. Everyone says, what have you done? What's your show reel? So these short films become your show reel, your calling card into the industry to get a lot more work. And I'm really proud to say, like, people like Mabato Monsu and Ria Muyeti and, you know, so many filmmakers who are now actively working in the industry, writing for big telenovelas and your lockdowns and the Queens. They literally came from that initiative. So look out for it and always visit that website, NFVF. They have, you know, there's always something exciting happening.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you, Sisbongi, where just 2 minutes for your closing remarks to wrap up, and whatever message that you want to leave us with, whatever message that you want to leave young filmmakers with, your closing remarks before we let you go. Thank you.
Yeah. I think for me, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I without the passion for storytelling and for films and for movies and documentaries and like the creative richness of Africa, I really wouldn't do what I do, because it's so hard. It really, really is hard. In a sense, and when I say hard, I mean, I think we're also a long way to being the industry that we need to be, sadly, because we have so much richness in our stories, in, you know, and not just stories, just technically South Africa, we're very rich in that. And I think that to be in this industry, you have to have that passion, you have to be dedicated to building that industry and being part of it, and creating spaces, enabling other people to work in a more, I suppose, softer. I've had challenges of funding, I've had challenges of broadcasters deciding that, you know, maybe I'm being a little bit more controversial in what stories I want to tell, or broadcasters not appreciating me making a business decision around a project. You know, and I think there's still this incredibly paternalistic overview of creators, and I'm it's one barrier I'm very keen to break. I don't really talk much. I'm not one of those vocal filmmakers who are always everywhere saying, but I think if anything, this is one thing I want to challenge in a lot of ways, because there almost seems to be like a stifling of stories, you know, some kind of cultural imperialism that's coming. And I see it a lot when I watch these telenovelas where each and every one of them looks the same. There's witchcrafts, there's murder, there's that evil Black woman, and I'm like, surely in the richness that we live in, there are these amazing stories we can tell. So we have a long way to go, but I don't want to give up, and we shouldn't give up, because I believe that every struggle kind of leads to something amazing. And again, of course, thank you for having me, and I hope this was really useful for me as well. I think I just kind of let it all out, and I feel very safe, even though I don't see all the faces, but I felt like this was an incredibly safe space that I could be vulnerable in. And I thank you for that wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much, Sisbongiwe, and colleagues. We have come to the end of our today's program. I would like to express our thanks to Sisbongiwe and our panelists for the previous session, Usisqoli, Udanai, and Uncebakazi. Thank you. It is such a great honor to have you guys coming to engage with us on this platform and enriching particularly the conversations that we are currently having as the Center for Women and Gender Studies. Thank you. And thank you, colleagues, for joining us for our day 2 of the film festival. We are looking forward to our day 3, which is our last day tomorrow. So tomorrow we have 2 films that we will be discussing, Strike a Rock and Fortunate. And then we will have a workshop by Sihle Hlophe, and the session will be facilitated by Usiphokazi Tau. And from me, Uhlengiwe Ndlovu, on behalf of the Center for Women and Gender Studies and Nelson Mandela University, and everyone else who's part of the organizing team, we thank you so much for joining us, and continue the engagement, continue the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hlengiwe.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.